Good evening, everybody, and welcome to 7 Days of Destiny, the February edition. My name is Joshua de Sousa, and we are continuing with a brand new topic for the month of February. So, we are going to be discussing 7 days of Black Bible history. Again, that is 7 days of Black Bible history, where we'll be talking about several people in the Old and New Testament of African presence who more likely than not looked like you and me. So this is, I don't want to call it an exclusive teaching, but the purpose of this particular teaching is to encourage our Black and brown believers, those like me who understand that this thing that we call Christianity, this is not a hand-me-down. This is not something that we inherited from anybody else. We have as much of a role to play in the development and creation and birth of Christianity as anybody and everybody else. So my whole purpose for this is to debunk some of those myths that you may have heard that we got it from somebody else, when the truth is we got it directly from God himself. So I'm excited to share some of the devotional entries that God has given me for a brand new book that shall be coming out before the month is over, which will be entitled Absorbing the Sun, the Ministry of Melanin. It's very hard to see because of the lighting, but you'll see it in the comments. But this is called Absorbing the Sun, the Ministry of Melanin, which is a 60-day Black History devotional journal on African presence in the Bible. So we'll be reading a few of those 60-day samples tonight and the rest of the 7 days of Black Bible history. So we're going to start with what I believe is probably one of the most important passages for this topic, which is the book of Matthew chapter 15. And we're going to start at verse 16 and go through 21. So once again, this is Matthew chapter 15, verse 16 through 21. And the word of the Lord reads this: The soldiers led Jesus away into the palace, that is the praetorium, and called together the whole company of soldiers. They put a purple robe on him, then twisted a crown of thorns and set it on him. And they began to call out to him, Hail, King of the Jews! Again and again they struck him on the head with a staff and spit on him. Falling on their knees, they paid homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they took off the purple robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him out to crucify him. And here we go. Verse 21, a certain man from Cyrene, Simon, the father of Alexander and Rufus, was passing by on his way in from the country, and they forced him to carry the cross. So for the topic for tonight, the very first topic is 7 days of Black Bible history. I want to talk about the first drop of blood. The very first drop of blood. Growing up, I would often hear that church and Christianity was handed to me and my people as a brainwashing mechanism and a hand-me-down t-shirt from our slave owners. Unfortunately, I know it is true that many of our ancestors' first introduction to Christ was from their oppressors. However, we saw how they took it and made it their own, causing many to trust in God for the end of slavery, build their own churches with the little resources they had, and birthed a legacy of some of the most powerful preachers in the history of the kingdom. I wonder if that is because despite how our ancestors learned about this faith, there was an inherited instinct in their spirits which allowed them to realize that the cross of Christ was just as much theirs as it was anyone else's. I don't even even think many of them even realize that it was a man who looked just like them, who was one of the first people to be smeared with Jesus's blood before he died to save all humanity and eternity from sin. As Jesus is carrying his cross, he is already pushing himself beyond human limitation. He has not slept in the last 48 hours. He has not eaten all day. Blood was flowing out his back after he was beaten with the whips covered in sharp objects, and a crown of thorns thrusted into his head. When the Roman soldiers saw that he could no longer make it to his final destination by himself, they pulled a random man from the crowd and forced him to help Jesus finish the journey to Calvary's Hill. Simon was an observer of Judaism and came in town to celebrate the Passover season, but he traveled far from a country named Cyrene. And Cyrene is actually located in Libya on the coast of northeast Africa, and it was about 37 miles from Jerusalem. What would have taken us about an hour to get to by car would have probably taken Simon several days by camel, horse, or even foot. I am sure he was already physically weary and tired from the journey, but his plans were interrupted with this inconvenient assignment. Simon grabbed the cross and walked with Jesus the rest of the way to Calvary, getting blood on his clothes and probably even splinters from the cross. On top of that, the guards are probably still whipping Jesus, so Simon probably got hit a few times as well. Not only that, this disqualifies Simon from being able to participate in Passover because he is ceremonially unclean due to being covered in blood. It is kind of the reverse of how people who look just like him hundreds of years later would be considered unclean due to their complexion, not being able to worship in the same churches, learn from the same schools, or eat at the same tables. Simon may not have realized it at that moment, but little did he know was that he was a part of one of the most important events to ever happen in natural and spiritual history. He was one of the first recipients of Jesus's eternal blood that was shed to save every nationality, every tongue, and every generation. Jesus would have never made it to Calvary without Simon, and I honestly believe that even though the Romans picked him randomly, God picked Simon intentionally. In the same manner, we are called to help Jesus carry the cross of his gospel, in addition to all the amazing dreams and goals he has given each of us. Half of the warfare the enemy plagues us with daily is the discriminatory microaggressions, unfair financial and societal disadvantages that we were born into, and the return of increasingly blatant attempts to destroy us and take away our rights. That is a lot of weight and pressure to plow through while trying to live with the holy love, righteous restraint, and fulfilling the great commission of being the hands and feet of Jesus. However, we serve a God who specializes in making the impossible happen, even in the face of inconvenience. So from this day forward, never, ever, ever let somebody tell you that your faith is illegitimate, because in reality, this faith is a part of your inheritance.